Everyone, and welcome to this CPD session, which is about team-based learning, optimizing active and collaborative learning in a blended model of learning and teaching. And it's me, I'm Sarah Honeychurch, and I work in academic and digital development. And I'm joined by my colleagues from the Adam Smith Business School, Margaret Fletcher and Iyke. And I hope Iyke will join us quite shortly. So, structure of the session today, we're going to start out with a little bit of an overview of what team-based learning is. Margaret will then introduce the cohort that we developed this blended model of team-based learning in, which is a Masters in International Business. And Margaret and Iyke will both go through some facts about the cohort and how we actually did the teaching. And then what we're going to do is give you some practical exercises to give you a bit of a flavour of what TBL is like from the point of view of being parachuted in as a student. I gave you your pre-reading, which was only 2 pages long. I hope you managed to get through it because there will be a test. Not joking. And there'll be plenty of time for questions. Drop your questions into chat and we'll try and pick them up, and we'll leave time as we go along. And we really want this to be an informative day. So if you've got any questions about how you your cohort, ask us. We're not pretending to be experts, but we are practitioners who have used it successfully. And we'll also share a bit of feedback from how our students found it as well. Okay, so what is team-based learning? So say it's a special form of collaborative learning using a special sequence of individual work, group work, and immediate feedback. And the thing about team-based learning is a lot of the elements of team-based learning seem very, very familiar to people because they are familiar, but it's very, very formulaic. And the reason that it is so powerful is that the elements are put together in a very structured way. And if the stages are followed properly, then it leads to a very, very powerful form of learning. So each of the elements works on their own, but they all work better when they're put together into this specific recipe. Why did we decide to use it? Well, we were coming from a business school environment, so very much an emphasis on employability. And we wanted to tie it into the learning and teaching strategy, and particularly to graduate attributes, which are very, very important for business students to get the team working skills and other skills, and also to know that they are getting these skills as they go through their studies. So as we say, it's to raise awareness of the importance of professional and academic skills development, which is a direct quote from our learning and teaching strategy. So it's also tied to our school strategy, which I haven't put in, but it's very similar, which derives from the learning and teaching strategy. Sorry, my computer just froze. I'd like to try and get the next slide. Okay, so as I say, it's a very highly structured form of small group learning, and it depends on a variety of things. The teams must be properly formed and managed, and I think Margaret will talk a little bit to that. They're permanent groups of 5 to 7, selected by the educator according to specific criteria. And students must be motivated to come to class prepared. It is a flip model of teaching, but it's a flip model that really depends on students having done all the preparation. We can't, it stops freeloaders when it's done properly. And importantly, students must be able to learn to use course concepts to solve problems. So it's very, very tied to the curriculum. It's not just group work for the sake of group work, it's group work for the sake of fleshing out the graduate attributes, fleshing out the core concepts. And the real good thing about it is it builds in accountability. It builds in accountability to students to do the work for themselves, and it also builds in accountability to students to do work for others. And very, very quickly you find that students might not quite get it for the first couple of weeks, but after that they really get it. And they really realise that they will be letting other people down. So it's peer pressure without any sort of bullying, that people do it because they realise they'll be letting other people down. Also, it removes passive learning. So it's very important. Obviously, the university strategy is towards active learning. It means that everybody in the group needs to be active. As I said, there's no room for freeloaders. There's no place for freeloaders. And also it removes anonymity. So the students in the groups, when they give each other feedback, they do it, typically they will do it face to face. So it removes the sort of nastiness of that you can get sometimes with online feedback, where students think that they're faceless so they can say what they like, but it's accountable. Okay, let's get the next slide. Okay, so TBL works on modules or units which are a variable length. They can be a week long, they can be 2 to 3 weeks long. The session we developed was a week long, but really it's all around bite-sized pieces of teaching or long pieces of teaching, rather than just saying everyone's got to be a week long. You work out for yourself what content you've got, what structure you want. As I said, it's a flipped model of teaching. So it starts with pre-class preparation. It then goes into what's called a readiness assurance process, which is where the educator actually tests the students to make sure everybody is on the same page. And then the bulk of team-based learning is application activities, which are very often case studies, and they are there to get students to really get in depth with the course concepts and practice them in a structured group environment. Optionally, you can get a peer evaluation of group members at the end of the process. Optionally, you can tie this to group or individual summative assessment. And the original model of team-based learning was suitable for asynchronous online learning. And what we have done is we adapted it for asynchronous online learning. So I won't go into that. It's just a bit more detail. The application activities, again, it's very, very important that these are deep, they test deep concepts. And it's the 4 essential elements is they need to be significant problems, they need to be important. So not just group work for the sake of group work that actually really tests the important elements of the course. They need to be the same problem. So each group works on the same problem, they work on them individually. And they need to be problems where there are specific choices. There's more than one choice that can be made, but there is a specific range of choices. So typically A to D or A to G. And really importantly, you'll get this when you come to it, when all of the teams have done the work, they all report back at the same time. So you don't get group A reporting, then group B reporting. Every group says what answers they've got, because there's nothing worse than group A saying everything and then group B saying, well, yeah, just what group A said. Okay. So really sorry about this. My computer just keeps freezing every time I get to change a slide. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Margaret now, and Margaret is going to talk about the specific context in which we developed all of this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. I was the convener for the MSc International Business from about 2014-15, and Sarah moved into the office next door, which was, these things often come about serendipitously. And I had been working for quite a few years in working with a lot of project and group work. The programme is very highly focused about that. So they do, it ends up with a big consultancy project they do for a real company. And it's, it's really, high commitment, and high outcomes for the students. And so they get this chance to work with companies that want to extend their international business. So it's a real life project, but we prepare them from semester 1 and they do that in semester 2. And so what we've done, they start off with general 3 weeks of courses, and one of the courses is managing across cultures and comparative management. So they've done a kind of 3 weeks intensive 3 courses, and then they come to the MSc-IB. And this is the programme outline. So this is it's very explicit that I've made it, or it's become very explicit, and that's part of what they're learning. So they're applying, it's all about this part of the course after they've done the taught input in terms of managing across cultures as the application, and that's how we're very much focused the course, the programme when they come. So it's about applying theory to practice, within multicultural teams, making it very explicit that this is part of the learning process that they're doing. And also I wanted to highlight the benefits and challenges of working in multicultural teams. So not only do you have, you know, the general teamwork issues, you know, but the fact that there's people from really diverse countries and backgrounds and everything coming into the programme. And really highlighting this and the fact that they're problem solving in the multicultural teams, and that they're developing these international management competencies and working on things like, you know, obviously their management of themselves, their time and workload planning, and reflecting on roles and responsibilities and performance, and really taking ownership of that. So that's really what I was trying to make explicit. And I'd been doing it for several years, and then I came across this idea, and I think it was a seminar that Sarah ran for the business school when she arrived, and I thought that could be really great. So we brought it in to the course. I started it. So they do their 3 weeks of these 3 courses that they do at the business school. So it's like it's international strategic management, global business environment, and management across cultures. So they've done a lot of basic theory, but then they come on and then they start with us doing another 3 courses that are very much the group work orientated, and it's quite an innovative approach. They start it in early October, and they do these 3 integrated courses where we've got joint project across 3 courses. So they're transferring these skills between international entrepreneurship, market analysis for new ventures, and entrepreneurial finance, and so it's really high stakes as well. But I really emphasize the fact this first semester is very much a safety net. It's very much for them to learn how to work in these multicultural groups as well, and it's, as I said, it's made very explicit in the programme. So what I did, we actually have quite an innovative approach in that 25% of the assessment is across the 3 courses. So they do their presentations and their group project, but they do an individual piece as well. So 75% is assessed for each of the 3 courses individually, 3 different bits of assignment. And then we've got this 25% assessment that involves the group work. So then the stakes are, again, they've still got a lot of ownership and impact on their own performance through the 75% of the 3 courses, and then they've got this joint bit, because when it goes into semester 2, most of the course, the big consultancy project, is assessed through the group work. So really, you know, we've got this safety net for them to learn. So that's kind of the background and why it's really important, you know, for them to learn. And also when I took on the programme as well, I was learning that actually in business schools across the world, you know, freeloading was coming up. You go to a teaching and learning session, it's how do we stop it? How do we get group participation? You know, how do we you make things fair and equitable? So, and we hadn't had too many problems on this course, but it's certainly something that I wanted to try and, you know, limit the problems of that. So you want to go on to the next slide, I think. Yeah, okay. So what we did was we had all this mix. We had country and regional background to create the diverse teams. We had, you know, at least 16 countries on this programme. So for the business school, it's, I'd say, the most highly diverse programme, you know, in the business school. So we have a mixture of most of the continents are represented. Maybe no one very often from Australia and New Zealand, but basically from everywhere else. So we make the teams different regional and country backgrounds. So if we've got, say, a lot of people of students from China, we make sure that we mix up the regions that they're from, because you find a lot of say Chinese students that come, they're actually from the same schools or whatever, and you know, they'll stick together. So we made sure that we tried to create this diversity. Gender was another big thing. So those were the 2 key things in semester 1. And then we come on to the other projects. Then we would then have more information about the students. We would get their backgrounds. We'd do more personality profiling to help take that into the teams for semester 2. So it was different teams. Semester 1, semester 2, we would then change the teams around as well. So the team allocation worked for a whole semester. So semester 1 was 1 team, and semester 2 they get into another team. Personality poker is the one I used for semester 2, and that really divides them up into 4 key groups of whether you're a creative, you're an analyst, you're goal orientated, or you're a relationship type of person. And we try and have 1 person in each group, which worked quite well. Let's go on to the next slide. I think we've got some background? Not me. If someone could turn off the mute, that's lovely, thank you. So we've actually run it 3 times. The first year I did it was autumn 2019, and what we did is we did it at the beginning of when they come on, when they finished their three weeks at the beginning of October, and we actually did an upfront 3-week workshop in induction week, and it was a 3-hour session, and we had everyone, Sarah, Iyke, myself, everyone there, and that was our kind of pilot. Then the next 2 years we've taken it online. The course normally has about 50 students, and they work in groups of usually 5 or 6. So we did it. I wasn't involved in that one because I was actually on study leave 2020-21, and we did it over 2 2-hour sessions. The great thing about it is not just are they learning about the multicultural learning and diversity of learning, they're actually learning content. So you're doing 2 things at one time. So when I did it this year, 2020-22, we actually devised it around one of the units that we might have taught in a standard lecture. So we took, how companies grow and what the growth models are, and we had a case study. So they would read the chapter, and they would then get a list of questions to do, and then they would come in and we'd discuss it in a 2-hour online session, and they would then put them into great breakout rooms, and then they would discuss it and report back on their group discussions on what the answers were to these questions. So it worked really well. So it was definitely flipped learning, with very structured every week through the semester and the autumn semester. There on a Friday we would send out and remind them of all the work for the next week, and we would have the team-based learning workshop at the end of the week as well. So they had the week's input to do that from the other sessions, whether it was an online lecture or a student workshop that we'd programmed. But it's amazing. We were able to go up to, the student numbers are at least 70 this year. I can't quite remember, but I worked out we had 12 groups. Before we normally had about 6 groups. And this year we coped really well online with 12 groups, so you can really scale it up. I know Iyke runs this, he's become our local expert, and he runs it across several courses, and he's dealing with hundreds of students on some courses as well. So this year I had 12 groups, and it worked really well. And what we did was they then would put their group answers in on the chat, and they all have a group number, and that's what you use for the breakout rooms, and that's what you use for their groups. So down the chat, they just put group 1 answers, group 2, and we could see all the answers. And they did it all at the same time, so that they're not altering it depending on what other groups have said. So that's really our experiences. I would say, what else? Trying to make this a really explicit and an application of this these ILOs about learning to work multicultural. And anecdotally, I work on another course where it's not explicit, and I've just run a group project for a different MSc, and I'm doing an elective. And I would say, we hardly had any issues with free. We've always got a highly committed group and we've always done experiential learning projects. And but I would say this year, you'd think with 70 students, the problems would be worse. And I would say we really had hardly any problems with any freeloading. Whereas this course that doesn't make explicit and doesn't use team-based learning or diversity as a main learning outcome, I'd say I've had a lot more issues with kind of group problems and freeloading this year. Not a lot more, but there's certainly been a few more incidences. So different courses as different programs as well, though. But so it certainly suits this course, and we've got highly engaged students anyway, and they do. I think one of the things that attracts them is this experiential learning, and the fact they get to do this big group project for a real local company that's going international as well. So we're training students, we're educating students to be either quite often they become international entrepreneurs and set up their own businesses, or they work as a global manager, and some of them go back into family businesses as well in their home countries. So it's quite entrepreneurial, or a sort of global manager type of occupation that they go into. So it is really important, and cultural intercultural management is one of the key things that they need. How's that, Sarah?
That's fantastic, Margaret. Thank you ever so much. And I can see that Iyke is here now. So Iyke, I'm going to hand over to you for the next 3 slides.
I think I've talked a little bit about some of this, but
Iyke, you're muted.
Hi, sorry. Hello,
Welcome.
I'm in class here in Boyd building. So I just had a class finished, so sorry I was a bit late. So team-based learning has become quite interesting for students. There are a number of things we see there that students can cover a whole unit of a course via team-based learning. So, and we can actually limit how much the teacher or the lecturer takes control of the class, almost hand over that to students, become a facilitator as against just providing content, and the students are really learning. In what we do is that mostly students have a book chapter to read, and then prepare because team-based learning has the pre-reading side of, which is preparatory side of it, and then the quizzes that come with it, the IRAT and the TRAT, and then the application, which is more kind of group working. There are a number of dynamics that really have worked there. So students, when they do the IRAT, we try to test their individual performance compared to their group performance, and we use Iyke to do that. Sarah, you want to go? So in class, so with the online approach, we let students do the IRAT at home. So, and then we record that on Iyke, which is a response software that helps us to collect their answers. And then we put them in group when they're in class. They answer exactly the same questions, and they declare their answers simultaneously using the chat function on Zoom. Zoom has been really helpful in terms of delivering the online approach. Students also have opportunity to actually get feedback from their peers and compare notes in terms of how they perform. But what we find out, that will probably come in the next slides. What we found out is really that individually they do well, but they do better when they work in groups. So we also provide feedback to them as they work through the TRAT, IRAT, and we can, if there are questions, they can actually challenge some of the questions. And so the way you structure it is almost some of the answers could look almost similar, but not exactly, so that they can have opportunity to discuss their answers. And then at the end of that, we kind of have a short mini lecture to actually bring everything together so that students make sense of that. So looking at student evaluation, before I actually talk about students evaluation, you look at the dynamics of the group in terms of, Margaret mentioned that the dynamics of the group really improves. People, they work together. The issues we used to have within the courses we deliver. So I'm teaching business planning this semester, and we've had 3 team-based learning activities. So the issues we used to have, we don't have them anymore, because students actually, they work in group throughout the semester. So the norming and the forming, the group dynamics, all that components just gels in while they work throughout the course, throughout the semester. The other thing I found out was in one of my courses, which I didn't use team-based learning, students switch off their videos. They you could have 100 and something students in a course, but they're in the introduction to management course, they switch off their video. In the courses where I use team-based learning, students just, you don't even tell them, they switch on their videos, because they work, first of all, they start with small groups. So automatically their videos are on in the small groups of 5 and 6. So when they move into the section, the larger session, their videos are on. They don't have that. So you are seeing, because there's a difference between actually providing, discussing with students whose videos are off and those whose videos are on. You can look at their eyes, they can understand you. So the dynamics is different when you use team-based learning. So it's addressed a lot of problem there. But what I found out also is that what we found out in terms of our evaluation is that majority of the students here, 96% in both courses, in market analysis and the business planning, all the students have really been showing they give us almost 90. So in business planning, we have 98% of students agree that they have sufficient opportunity to interact with other courses. In market analysis, we have 96% of students, which is really quite interesting. And some of because we bring entrepreneurs as well to work with them throughout the course. So they also come back and it feels like working with an entrepreneurial project. They don't see it in terms of the academic, even though they have academic, the individual assignment is usually critical essay or reflective essay, but they end up feeling like they have been in an entrepreneurial project and they just come up with those relevant team skills that are valuable for both industry and education. So I think that's
yes, thank you,
yeah,
Iyke.
that's me there. Yeah.
So yeah, and I would echo what both Margaret and Iyke have said there, that when I went to help facilitate the workshops each time, the students were fantastic. They all had their mics on, they all had their videos on, they were all absolutely engaged. And at a time when colleagues were telling me that they were having issues getting students to turn on their mics and videos, we had the opposite experience. So we put it down to doing the team-based learning, but actually I also put it down to Margaret and Iyke just being fantastic educators. And I know I've said this before, but they have such dedicated students. And so it's all part of the package. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take you through some of the exercises. So what we're going to do is we're going to, hopefully, as long as I can work out how to do it, we're going to assign you to breakout rooms. And we're going to we're going to give you 3 questions, and we're going to ask you to do the questions individually. That's the IRAT, the individual readiness assurance test. And then we're going to ask you to do the same questions again as a group and make consensus about what the 3 questions are. We're going to give you a few minutes in your breakout rooms to do that, not very long because it shouldn't take very long. And then we're going to bring you back into the main room, and then we're going to get you to simultaneously answer the questions as each group. So when you go into the breakout room, we're going to ask you to appoint a note taker and a spokesperson. This can be the same person or different people. And we're going to ask you to reach consensus about the answers. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute. So how many people do we have? I think I'll create 3 breakout rooms. So I think we'll probably give you 5 minutes for this. We'll leave you to it. We'll maybe pop in and see how you are. What I'll do is put the questions into chat. Excuse me, you'd think I would have been more organized.
I'm not sure